even when you have the surgery to try to remove it, it's a mess when you go in. I mean, they've likened it to like having bubble gum in your hair.
Jeez.
I mean, you cannot, you can't save the hair. You're basically going to cut a big hunk out. And so, and there are times where you'd have to remove so much tissue, they end up having to just leave that mesh in there, and it's causing, pain and suffering, and they just can't get it all out.
And the materials that they're using in some of these meshes are just shocking.
Well, yeah, it's the polypropylene and then some of the polyester, but it's just products that shouldn't be used in the human body. We've talked about that in the past, and it's just a disaster.
Prioritizing profits. Prioritizing
dangerous drug and product cases.
Welcome back. Another episode, prioritizing profits, dangerous drug and product cases. Another week, another show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Great. Good to be here. Good to be with my kiddo.
Any eventful news from this last week?
Well, let's see. I don't know about eventful. We got back into our little 52 hike project. Finally got hike number 30 after a bit of a hiatus between the crazy heat and then my hip injury. We were a bit behind. So.
And when did you guys start this? Is this December to December? I mean, you're kind of coming close on time here.
Yeah, well, we're in trouble. So it started January 1st. I mean, in theory, you're supposed to do 52 hikes in a year, but with an injury, it may. I mean, unless we really cram them in.
Yeah, I mean, sacrifices need to be made.
I know. He'll have to just carry me.
Yeah.
Fireman carry me.
He should have been when you were injured. Like the little dog backpacks where you can throw them on the back. I got one for Bruno. He should get one for you too. And then.
Okay. Well, I wasn't like injured on the trail. I was injured during my weightlifting situation. But it's been difficult.
Fair.
Hiking. So that's about. We did that on Sunday. It was Fair Weekend in Sonoyta, so that was kind of fun.
Fair Weekend.
Yeah, the Santa Cruz County Fair. So just like, the fair, but a little bit smaller. The fair we've gone to, but quite a bit smaller.
I was going to say, for anyone that's not a native Sonoytian.
Sonoyta, yes.
What is it? What does the Fair Weekend entail?
Well, it's similar to any fair. I mean, they have like the 4-H and they have the, all of the animals that are raised and get prizes, and then they have contests for the pies and the jams and
so all the
tomatoes and all of that.
Is there because I've seen like the world's biggest pumpkin. There's like the big size of pumpkin contest. Is there something along those?
Well, they have produce and they get first prize and second prize. I mean, I don't think the world's largest is going to be happening there. So
I wasn't sure. I mean, if it's just flavor based with the jams and the pies, can you also just walk up to stands and try their pies?
No, you can't. Only the judges test them.
What the hell?
Yeah, it would be tempting.
Yeah, I mean, at least they could like make a few bucks if they're selling the best pie in Sonoyta. I'm sure people are going to want to buy a piece.
Well, they're not selling it. These are people who make it at home and they win the prize, and the rest of us just have to believe that it was really awesome.
They just have to imagine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Be jealous.
I would like to experience it myself. Make sure it really is the best pie in Sonoyta. Maybe I need to become a judge. That seems like
I think that's the way you do it. You have to sign up.
Oh, a good, nice little side job there.
Yeah. So we also watched the dog show. So the 4-H club has, I guess, a dog club within it, and they have dogs that are supposedly very well trained to go through these obstacle courses.
Yes, I've seen them.
You've seen this? Okay. Well, we watched it. I think this is the first year that they've done this with this particular 4-H club. But yeah, the dog, it was not impressive, I'll just say.
Why is that?
Well, the dogs were kind of clueless. The kids seemed a little bit clueless.
Yeah.
And some of the dogs were just having none of it.
They're just running around, do their own thing.
Well, not really running around, but they weren't sitting when they're supposed to sit. And then, they'd have to sit and the kid would have to like walk around them. They'd have to get them to jump over things and go through things. And some of the dogs were just looking like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And no. And they don't even give them treats while they do it.
I feel like you have to. Whenever I've seen like the very competitive ones, I don't know why. Sometimes I'd go down these TikTok rabbit holes or YouTube rabbit holes of like the most competitive dog competitions. And Australian Shepherds are usually the go-to. Those are the ones that you see a lot of, like the circus tricks or the really aerobic kind of highly detailed, skilled aerobics that dogs do. Aussie Shepherds, they're really good with it, but they always give them little treats whenever they do a little award. But I can't imagine being on stage, working for this the last several months. You're at home. The dog does everything they need to. You go up on stage, you're in front of hundreds of people. You try to pull it off, and the dog just doesn't listen.
Well, that's exactly what happened. Only there weren't hundreds of people. There's like 20 people.
Still.
Or 30 people. Yeah.
Even worse. Then you can actually see their face. Their face of disappointment.
We were sitting right in the front row, and some of these kids were just so frustrated. I kind of felt bad for them.
I'm sure. And then you got people in the back, you screaming boo and throwing tomatoes on stage. God.
Oh, no. But then there was like a couple of dogs in the audience. And so, of course, then the dogs were like, hey, what's going on? And, and then the dogs in the audience are like, I could do way better than that.
Chaos broke out.
Well, there was no chaos, actually. But but it kind of inspired me. I was like, oh, do you think Ava and Bauer could do this?
No shot. No shot. I'm surprised if you get them to sit still while you go around a corner, let alone walk a full circle around them and other dogs around.
Well, we've got some work to do.
I mean, if there's the best pie and Senora in the vicinity, all bets are off.
Oh, yeah. If there's food, it's gone for sure.
Well, that sounds like a good time. Honestly, I feel like some of those smaller town fairs would be more fun to a certain extent. I've never been a big fair guy, mostly because of the rides, and the rides always kind of concern me because, they're thrown up in a day or two.
Yeah.
And, I mean, they are massive. You go super high up. It seemed very risky. I didn't think of it as a kid, but, as I started growing up, I was like, wow, these seem pretty unsafe.
Well, yeah, and then the operators tend to not look like the most trustworthy people.
Yeah,
I wonder if they're the same ones that put them together and made sure all the screws were tight.
No, 100%. I mean, they're college kids that are just got off.
Yeah, these are not college kids. These are
trained professionals over here.
Well, I would say more like carnies,
Well, they do it for a living. They're professionals. They are actual professionals at it. That would make sense. I would feel better about it.
Profession that probably most people do not aspire to, but yeah.
Well, that sounds like a good weekend.
Yeah, good.
Mine wasn't nearly as eventful. Had some brunch, mimosas, Drunk Monk, fantastic place in Scottsdale. Highly recommend it. Elephant in the room. Yes, I did get a haircut. If anyone's listening and you can't see it, just imagine a devilishly handsome, half white, half Mexican young adult, and there I am. He did cut a little too much. Because it had been a while since I'd gotten a haircut, and he was going at it, and he was cutting, and I kind of, I doze off, or I kind of I don't like talking to my hairdresser. I know a lot of people do, or I guess it's a barber, because it's a guy. No, I just kind of zone out, and then I zone back in. He's like, "Oh, that was a lot of hair," and I look in the mirror, I'm like, "Yeah, wow, you did. That is a lot of hair that you took off there."
Well, I think it looks really good, and your hair grows pretty quickly too. So
it does,
and I didn't a little bit longer.
I didn't know what to do with it. I was thinking about growing it out, getting some luscious locks, maybe a slight perm, and not the perm, the cringy, really curly
like
ones.
The 1980s. Actually.
Yeah, no. I was thinking like very wavy, just a quick wave. But it's a big commitment, and when you grow out your hair that long, you kind of have to commit, especially as a guy, you have to commit to like a few months of just not looking good, where the sides are just going to be awkwardly, uncomfortably long. You can't style it; it sticks out too much, and then eventually it gets to a good stage. But until then, it's rough.
All right. Well, I think the long, luscious locks sounds kind of good.
Well, we'll see. I mean, now I got to commit an extra few months to it after this most recent ordeal with the barber. But it's okay. We're back at it. I feel clean shaven, ready for the show.
Very good. Well, the other elephant in the room is I did get my eyebrows waxed.
I was gonna say something. I didn't know if you wanted me to mention it.
Always important. I got another trip coming up. It was time.
Yeah, it's time. You gotta look out for those little things.
Yep.
Well, we should probably hop into the show. Start where we always start. Updates on cases.
All right. Always updates on cases. One case that we talked about several weeks ago involved a lawsuit against Walmart over huffing from these air cans, and that it's this product that you use to clean computer keyboards and that sort of thing. and it's called Dust Off. I don't know if you remember us talking about that.
Yeah, it's well, because I remember Whip It, where
Yeah.
you could use the whipped cream, and kids used to do that to get a little bit of a buzz going. But this is a little bit more hardcore. You go to Walmart, you buy this full canister of it, and people were buying it and using it to get a little buzz.
Yeah, apparently getting a big buzz. So it's called Dust Off, manufactured by Falcon. And so what happened is this individual was huffing the stuff and driving, and he was really high, and he caused an accident with a woman and killed her. And so it was a wrongful death case. They sued the manufacturer of the product, saying that they knew that people use this to get high and that it's dangerous and there aren't warnings. And then also Walmart, who sold the product. And we've talked before about the chain of commerce.
Yeah.
So sued both of them. And the case is still going on against the manufacturer, but Walmart settled out. Right. And it's for an undisclosed amount, so we do not know how much. And that happens sometimes. Oftentimes, the defendant wants a non-disclosure. And usually, there could be a variety of reasons for that. But oftentimes, if they settle for a lot, they don't want people to know that because they don't want it to look like an admission on their part that maybe they were at fault if they're still saying that they were not.
Well, other people might be incentivized if they see a big paycheck to, find another product.
Well, yeah, or just pursue these types of cases, or think that okay, well, if they've paid on this one, then they're going to pay anytime this kind of situation comes up. So undisclosed amount, we don't know how much it is, but the case is still moving forward against the manufacturer of the product, and this was a really sad situation. And I don't think we talked about before, but the actual driver, and of course everybody's like, well, it's primarily the driver's fault. Yes, but the driver had, I'm sure, not significant insurance. Whatever insurance they had would have been collected. But criminally speaking, he was sentenced to 35 years in prison.
Wow.
Right, so second-degree murder and then also child endangerment because he had his 5-year-old daughter in the car with him.
Even worse.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Yeah. So bad stuff. But it's an interesting theory, an interesting argument, and so we'll also have to see how it comes out against the manufacturer, claiming that it's it's an unreasonably dangerous product. Again, you're supposed to be spraying your keyboards with it. You're not supposed to be huffing it. But this one is stronger than some of the other products out there. I think it's like 99% of the chemical, which is difluoroethane.
And I know you mentioned that they wanted a non-disclosure agreement signed so it doesn't look like an admission of guilt, but isn't settling already kind of an admission to guilt that Walmart did know that this product had, it was stronger with how they were using it?
Well, not necessarily. Any time that a defendant settles, and even if it's not, if it's a disclosed amount, even if it's very public, like billions of dollars, they'll still say, we are not admitting fault. And what the argument they'll make is that they'll say, we're just trying to end this. It costs them a lot of money to hire attorneys. Sometimes it can affect their stock prices while these things are pending. And so their argument is that we didn't do anything wrong, but it's a cost of doing business, and it's going to cost us too much time and waste too much time and energy defending the cases. So in a case where they don't disclose the amount, it could be like some minimal amount. And sometimes as a plaintiff's attorney, there's a strong case and a weak case, and you may let the weak case out for whatever you can get, feeling like maybe you won't be successful at trial.
Yeah, it seems like those are kind of like PR responses to it of, this is just too much effort for us. But I would imagine, if it really was a case that they knew that they could win and they have the funds to pursue it, why wouldn't they? And then on top of that, if it is a very small amount, why have a non-disclosure agreement in the first place? Because if anything, that might, keep people away from doing that same thing if they know there's just not that much money in it for them.
True.
Because with not knowing, you let the imagination run. It could be $10, it could be $10 million. Right. Who knows?
Well, and Walmart, quite frankly, I'm sure has a lot of attorneys on staff and can afford to fight these things if they choose to. So you may be right that maybe it's a very significant amount and too good for the plaintiff to pass up settling part of it. There is a downside when you have more than one defendant and you settle out with one of them, because you're still going to go to trial.
Yeah.
Now you've got that empty chair defense, and so everybody wants to point at the empty chair and blame that party. And ultimately at trial, suppose that they award a huge amount, but they say 95% of it or 85% of it or whatever goes to the empty chair. Well, you can't collect any more than you've already collected.
Yeah.
When I was reading this, it reminded me of a situation that actually happened at our firm a few years ago. And I don't think I mentioned this when we talked about the case the last time, about the employee who decided she was going to spray herself with something. I don't know if it was this brand, but the computer cleaner, because it's like freezing cold.
Yeah, so she was hot in the office, and
Well, no, actually, she thought it would be cool to spray her nipple.
Oh, okay, yeah, that sounds really exciting. Cool.
She was hilarious. This woman was really, really funny.
Yeah, she sounds like a real prankster, a real jokester over here.
But I mean, what the hell? So anyway, she does this, and then she went and told the office manager, because it kind of burned her. And she was fine. She didn't require medical treatment or anything along those lines. But then she was joking around about how it was going to be this big workers' compensation claim. I was like, all right.
Too far. Come on.
Well, I mean, it's the course and scope. It's not like she accidentally did it. I mean, she wasn't like working topless and cleaning her, cleaning her keyboard, and the next thing you know,
it wasn't a expected risk, I suppose. So this product, is it being taken off of Walmart shelves now?
That I don't know.
Because I feel like if they're settling this, then they would have to, no? And unless they leave it up, then wouldn't that leave the door open for more people to abuse it and then more cases to come up?
Well, I think the people who are abusing it are not the people who are generally going to be filing the lawsuit. It's going to be people who are potential, and like in this case, somebody abused it, caused the accident, and then the victim of that accident is bringing the lawsuit. And I don't know. I mean, I will check into that and see. I mean, perhaps they're warning about, or maybe they are removing that. I mean, there are other brands that are less potent.
Yeah.
That's a possibility. Or maybe they're putting some warning on the shelf.
Well, it'd be interesting if they continue to sell it, because like you said, there's other brands that do the exact same thing. So it would make me think that they would want to leave it on the shelves because they know it sells so much more, probably because it's being used in nefarious ways. Maybe a little bit of a stretch. I don't know.
Well, maybe they don't know why, but man, this one's just flying off the shelves.
Flying
the other
off
ones.
the shelves, yeah. Well, that's interesting. Definitely kind of interested to hear how that plays out with the second defendant, right? Because the actual manufacturer itself, I want to hear if they are held responsible, and if there's any evidence of them kind of knowingly or having known that it would have these effects and that it could be abused to this extent, and so much more so than their competitors, and maybe doing that intentionally.
Well, right, because maybe the fact that it's so much stronger is why it sells better, so they're making more money. And if they made it, safer and less potent, it would probably still clean products.
Yeah. I mean, like all their competitors, but who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe it just cleans that much better. That's an interesting one. What other updates do we have?
So Ozempic again is back in the news, and I'm assuming we're going to hear a lot about this. It's just out there so many people are using it, so many people are crazy about it. And we had talked before about the stomach paralysis and the fact that the food doesn't empty from the stomach. It takes a really long time. And so anytime you have anesthesia, it's become a big issue, because they always tell you not to eat or drink anything prior to the surgery. That's because they don't want you to aspirate and potentially die during surgery. So there was a debate about with anesthesiologists, well, what do we do? Do we stop the drug for 7 days? And now they're saying, we don't even know if 7 days is going to be long enough.
Wow. So food is staying in the stomach for 7 days?
Oh, yeah, sometimes longer.
I mean, how is it not just rotting and going bad?
Well, that's an issue, too. Think how nasty that is.
Yeah, it has to be. And also, I know that there's a lot of, I always hear this, I don't know the fact behind it, I'm not a scientist here, but your stomach enzymes affect and regulate so much more of your body than we know.
Oh, yeah, the gut biome.
Yeah, the gut biome is massive. And so having week-old food sit in there, I can't imagine the effect that it would have on your gut biome, and then therefore, your entire body.
Yeah. Well, and it's a problem for sure. So what they're saying now is that a lot of the anesthesiologists are just saying, you know what, if I have a patient that's on Ozempic, we're just going to intubate them. And so they're
What does that mean?
It's where they actually put the tube down their throat. And this is, so for a major surgery, you would do that. So you're actually, it's the machine is breathing for you.
Oh, okay. So
very-
that was my confusion. What's the big difference? So when you're under anesthesia, you have the mask on and you're inhaling it and you're asleep, but you continue to breathe by yourself. And you're
Right.
and you're inhaling it, and compared to
Well, it's a much, and that's done for minor procedures. Like if you think about like a colonoscopy, for example, I mean, you're not intubated for that. I mean, that's a big, serious thing where you're in a hospital, generally speaking. These other procedures, colonoscopies, endoscopies, breast biopsies, these types of things, I mean, they're relatively minor procedures and they don't need to do that. But now they're concerned that people are going to aspirate. And so they're intubating people for even really minor procedures. And there are risks with intubation. I mean, you can damage your throat, you can, they break teeth. There's all kinds of things that can happen. So it's, it's increasing the risk of the surgery. It's increasing the expense of the surgery, the length of time you might be hospitalized. It's, just another problem going along with this. And again, it's one of these things where they don't know it's a new medication and all of these different angles of how it affects you come up. And so this is another one.
Well, what's even scarier too is, like you said, it's a new issue. So I wouldn't be surprised if not every anesthesiologist knows about it. These are the ones that are aware, that they know to ask and they know to keep an eye out for it. And then if they see it, then then they can go to the plan B.
Right.
But I'm sure there's a lot of them that have no idea that this is even a risk, and they're continuing with the usual 24 hours of no eating, maybe 48, something like that.
Or even, sometimes even less. Sometimes it's the night before kind of thing. Yeah, I think that right now, because it is a hot topic and it's in the news, it is a topic of discussion. And so probably they're becoming more and more aware of it. But at the very beginning, until they started seeing these problems, and it came up because there were incidents where somebody, they did aspirate and they were like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And no, we haven't eaten for 2 days. And it turns out that it's because they were on Ozempic. So now that's a question that they're absolutely going to be asking. They always ask about medications you're on, but that's going to be a really important one.
Yeah, and I wonder too, because a lot of the Ozempic abuse that we've been seeing, right? The reason that's such a hot topic is that people are using it for aesthetic reasons, right? Not because they actually need the drug. It's because they're looking to lose weight. And so I'm wondering if there's also a connection with, plastic surgery, because those are also the type of procedures that you would need an anesthesiologist, right?
Yeah.
And you wouldn't be intubated for it. And so, if those things line up at all, then that would be interesting.
Yeah. And although I would hesitate to maybe say abuse, because technically these people are getting it prescribed by the doctor, although sometimes some med spas, they're getting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if they're using it, even if it's getting prescribed, if it's getting prescribed for the wrong reasons or under the counter and knowingly not, correctly, that's still abuse.
Yeah. Well, but the Wegovy actually is specifically for weight loss.
Yeah.
But I mean, but I agree with you. I mean, it's the gist of it is that it's not being taken for type 2 diabetes. It's being taken for aesthetic purposes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And like you said, I think we are going to be seeing a lot more of it. It is kind of a hot button topic, the Hollywood drug. And now that it's kind of out there, I think there's a lot more kind of everyday citizens looking for an easy, quick fix.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they can't get it. It's just, everybody wants it. And along those lines, another issue with it is its effect on people who are on seniors or people 65 and over, because when they were doing all of the testing, they did not include people, they did not include older people in the studies. And so they're saying that we don't know how it affects them. However, some of the problems that could come up are the fact that when we're older, and I'm getting a little bit close to these ranges, when you're older, you start losing muscle mass, and you can become more frail. And so when people people lose weight really quickly, that can, really worsen those effects.
Yeah.
And they can lose a lot of muscle. And for older people, when they need to lose weight, the way to do it is very slowly, making absolutely sure that you're getting enough protein, and also combining that with weight-bearing exercises to, continue to keep your muscle mass, what you have, because we're automatically losing it. And so when you do something like this, where it's really dramatic, fast weight loss, and you're not eating very much, who's to say that you're getting all of the nutrients and that you need?
Yeah, I mean, even if you are eating it, if it's sitting in your stomach for a week plus, you're not getting those nutrients, right? It's not breaking down. It's not going into your body. If you eat,
That's true too. Yeah,
you have a ton of protein in your stomach. It's not getting into the places it needs to if it's just sitting there.
Yeah. So we don't know how it affects older adults, but we know that a lot of people are trying to access it. And so again, that's just one other issue that may well be coming up.
Yeah. And is this, because I know it is a diabetes drug, that's kind of the primary use for it. And I know diabetes is really common in the elderly. Is this a drug that is commonly used by elderly?
Well, I don't know that it's. I mean, it's new, obviously, and I think more people are looking for this drug as opposed to other. There's always diabetes meds, and you always see those advertised. But this one, I think, has a certain appeal because, as they say, you may lose weight. And then on TikTok, you will lose a shit ton of weight.
Well, I can't imagine a 70, 80-year-old kind of being like, oh, give me the one that I lose a few pounds on.
Well, but, say 65, and
they're still out in the field, roaming.
I don't know. Maybe they're widowers, and they're looking for round two, and
I mean,
on the dating sites, Tinder, and
apparently geriatrics are some of the most sexually active.
Oh yeah, I remember we talked about this with the pineapple.
Did we? Totally forgot. Well, Christina worked in a nursing home, and she, she definitely mentioned it and heard rumors of it.
Yeah. So I didn't know that. I mean, I know she worked at the nursing home, but there was really activity going on.
Well, I think it's just, I don't know if I think it is factual, but I don't know if it's something that's kind of blown out of proportions because it's so interesting and surprising. But I think anyone that kind of works around elderly, you kind of have this thought of like, wow, I wonder what they do when the sun goes down. How crazy, especially in a retirement home, how crazy do things get over here?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I haven't really thought about that too much.
Well, anyways, that's a good update on Ozempic. I'm definitely curious to hear more from it because, we mentioned this the first time we brought it up, is that with a drug like this that wasn't being used that often or by that many people originally, with the higher usage of it, there's going to be more problems that come up. And of those problems, like the food just hanging out in the stomach, no one really knows what's going to happen. No one knows, how to deal with it or the effects on the body. And so I'm sure there's going to be more updates of, some of the conditions that are already coming up, but even more conditions that it causes. Yeah,
definitely. And then we've been following it from the beginning, and we'll kind of see where it goes.
And we've been talking about a lot of the cases that we've been handling. Always got a nice little section on it. Is there any updates or just more information on some of the cases that we are handling?
Well, so what we're focusing on today is hernia mesh again, and we have spoken about it a couple of times and a couple of the different products that are out there. But the real key that I wanted to address this time is just the timing. That these cases, they've been going on for over 5 years. We are coming up on another bellwether trial in October, and then following that one, there'll be another one at the beginning of 2024. And these cases it looked like they were going to be settling about a year and a half ago, but it's kind of a hot topic now because with the 3M earplug situation, that case settled, as we talked about, and all of a sudden people are coming out of the woodwork and they're saying, wait a minute, I want to be a part of this, and it's too late to do that. And we've had a lot of people calling, well, why didn't I know about this? And, well, yeah, I did know about that, and I started filling out the paperwork, but I never completed it, but I want to complete it now. And the problem with that is that if you wait too long, it potentially can be too late. And with the hernia mesh cases, this is a product that so many people have. I mean, it is a really common surgery. So many people have hernia meshes, and this mesh, it can break down, degrade in the body, and cause all kinds of problems, and usually requiring additional surgeries. So it's imperative that if you have one of these cases that you contact somebody sooner rather than later, because there will be a cutoff date. And, and then we'll be getting all the calls saying, wait a minute, wait, I want to get in on the settlement. And unfortunately, we will not be able to help them at that point.
Well, and this is a massive one. I know it's been going on for a really long time, and it's not just one type of hernia mesh. There's a lot of different brands that are causing these issues. And some of these issues, there are some really, really bad ones, and then there's some, on both sides of the scale, but some of them take a long time to come up.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing, too, because you have the surgery and you heal fine, you recuperate fine, you go back to work, you go back to your life. So it's not something that you know right away there's a problem. But then the product starts to break down in your body. And so it's never right away. If it's right away, then it's more likely a problem with the surgery, with a surgical infection, something like that. It's probably not the product.
Yeah.
The product, it's going to take months to even years before you really start experiencing these side effects. And they're really nasty. I mean, people have chronic pain. They end up with these infections as it starts to break down and cause inflammation, and they can perforate organs.
Yeah, I know one of the worst ones you mentioned is how it kind of entangles with the organs and muscles and everything in there, because, I mean, it's just put in there to kind of hold everything up, right? Maintain its spot, but when it starts breaking up, that same material starts just getting stuck in places it shouldn't be.
Right, and then even when you have the surgery to try to remove it, it's a mess when you go in. I mean, they've likened it to like having bubble gum in your hair.
Jeez.
I mean, you cannot, you can't save the hair. You're basically going to cut a big hunk out. And so, and there are times where you'd have to remove so much tissue, they end up having to just leave that mesh in there, and it's causing, pain and suffering, and they just can't get it all out.
And the materials that they're using in some of these meshes are just shocking.
Well, yeah, it's the polypropylene and then some of the polyester, but it's just products that shouldn't be used in the human body. We've talked about that in the past, and it's just a disaster.
So, this case has been going on for a while, and that's one of the reasons it's important to reach out as soon as possible, and definitely not wait till the last minute, is because you might be having problems that you don't realize are connected, or there's signs that you will have problems in the future. But once this is settled, or once that cutoff happens, what if someone gets hernia mesh that is involved in this case, or that the product is involved in this case, and then ends up having problems afterwards? I mean, they didn't even have a chance to get into the case. Does that ever happen? Or
yeah, it does. And it's not that they cannot pursue a claim, but they wouldn't be able to participate in that global settlement. So they could file an individual lawsuit and proceed with that, against the manufacturer of their mesh. But it is a much more time-consuming, expensive process. And so it really only makes sense for very, very severe injuries, because you're going to spend so much money getting to that point, getting to the trial.
Yeah.
And so your reward needs to be significant enough that you can, reimburse all of those costs and still have it make sense, and the attorney's fees, and still have it make sense for you. And so one thing that a lot of people don't know about the way that these global settlements work is that, people are signing up cases, they're, representing clients for years as this goes on. Some of the trials are happening, and then this global settlement comes up, and they're usually different categories, and each case is evaluated within whatever structure they've developed in that particular settlement. And people can choose not to participate in the settlement if they want to take their case out, have it sent back to their home court and litigate it. They can do that. But if you aren't in and the cutoff happens, you can't get in. And so for example, a law firm who maybe has 100, several hundred, or however many cases they have to agree at the cutoff time that they won't take additional cases. And so those firms, again, they need to look out for the clients that they do have.
Yeah.
And their deal is that they're not going to sign up additional clients. So that can really affect your ability to get an attorney at that point.
That makes sense. And these are the law firms that have the most experience. They know what to do. They know how, they just know how it all works. And so they're the ones that you would want on your side, but you won't be able to after that date.
Right. I mean, and there have been shenanigans. There was one story years ago about an attorney and his wife, who was also an attorney, then formed her own law firm.
Oh, yeah. That's like
it was convenient timing because all of a sudden now she's still signing in the cases in a different thing, of course, not hernia mesh, that was settling. So they were kind of, but I mean, you don't want to be caught up in something like that.
It's like the Texas two-step, but on the other side of the table.
On the wrong side. Yeah. So yes, you still could potentially bring a case if it's within the statute of limitations, which is another time limit. And again, another reason why you need to contact somebody sooner, not later, because you may just not even have a case, period, in a global settlement or outside of it. But once these, and for a lot of people, these settlements make the most sense. I mean, if they had, even pretty significant injuries, they're still going to get a good compensation, and they're not going to have to go through depositions. They're not going to have to go through trials, and they're not going to have that risk of potentially losing a trial because some of these cases are defense verdict. There's no question about that.
Well, and it makes sense too. Is that this whole reason that mass torts exist, right, is because when there are victims of the thousands, of the 100,000, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, whatever it is, these large numbers, it makes sense for both sides to kind of put it all together. And it's beneficial for both sides. It's easier for the defense, and it's easier for the prosecution as well. Kind of being left out on a raft by yourself later down the line, like you said, it is going to be incredibly difficult and sometimes not even make sense, even if you do have some serious injuries. And the same injuries that you may have down the line that you could get a payout from this first one, right? This original mass tort, everyone together, you might not be able to get it down the line. It just doesn't make as much sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's more cost effective and efficient for both sides.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really why the whole system works, why it was created, why it works.
Well, we'll see. And I think it's important for people to reach out too because, even if you aren't having problems, what's wrong with going to get it checked out? If I knew that there was something that had these potential risks in my body, even if I wasn't already experiencing it, but knew that there was, this entire process that has been going on for several years, I'd want to take a look. I want to, double check just to be sure so I don't have issues, in another year, another 2 years.
Well, and some people, even when they've come to us, they've said, how long was this bothering you? Well, it's been bothering me for a couple of years, but it just wasn't that bad. And then it got worse, and then it got worse, and then finally I got to the point and I went to the doctor. But again, if you know that you have a product that has potential problems and you're having any symptoms, get those checked out sooner rather than later. And a lot of people are like, I'm not going to go unless I'm in excruciating pain. And, but again, even aside from a lawsuit, forget about that. By the time you get to excruciating pain, you may have some horrible infection. And these infections can go septic and people have died. So you don't want to wait. You don't want to mess around with this kind of stuff.
And like you mentioned that there are 2 cases that are upcoming, 2 bellwethers, and these are going to be a pretty big deal, right? Because these are going to help decide kind of the next steps for both sides. And this has been something that's been going on for years and years. So a lot of people have been prepping for this.
Oh, yeah. And again, the bellwethers, what they do is it gives both sides an idea of what a jury will do with these types of cases, how they see the liability, how pissed off they are if there's punitive damages awarded. That's a huge thing. And then how they're valuing them. What kind of range of verdict are we looking at?
It's like a case study just for actual cases.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, and the test case. I mean, that's what it is. And so, and the whole selection process is designed to make sure that they are choosing representative cases, and there are usually different categories, and that they're choosing cases that represent the different categories so that both sides get a good idea. This type of case is going to get a verdict in this range, this type of case in this other range. And then that's the information that gets used when they're crafting this global settlement.
Yeah, and so that's something I didn't really realize is when I imagine bellwethers, you're just putting, I thought it would be something where you're putting the worst of the worst out there, right? You want the highest settlement so you get the highest settlement for everyone. But it makes more sense that there's kind of different levels to it because that's how it actually is. There's going to be different levels and everyone's going to kind of fit in those different levels. And so to have a variety of different cases, you get a better idea across the board.
Yeah. Well, and actually to get a little bit more into that, the process and again, it varies from case to case, and the judge decides how they're going to do this. But a lot of the times, both sides know what the cases are, and the judge will say, okay, defense, you propose 4 cases, plaintiffs, you propose 4 cases, and I'll just randomly pick 4 cases. So the defense looks through and they look at the cases that they think are the crappiest cases, that they're most likely that they're going to get a defense verdict. And there are always those cases. There are the cases where they have a million other problems and there's other things that could have caused this, or they were doing something ridiculous. I mean,
it's a very gray area.
Or just some of them are really shitty cases. I mean, like I think I told you about the one case, it was involving joint infections. And, we look at the medical records and this woman had been shooting heroin into her thigh. And now she has an infection in her knee. So, again, and here's the other, there's so many aspects of this, but some law firms will just file anything and everything, and they don't even look at it just to get their numbers up. And there are different reasons they want a lot of numbers too. They might want to try to get into the leadership, that sort of thing. But so there are bad cases that get filed, and in all of these, in these group discussions, it's always like, don't file bad cases. Don't file bad cases. It hurts everybody, and it doesn't help your client. Your client's going to be disappointed too if they have a bad case. Tell me the bad case, don't file it.
And people still do it.
And they still do it. And so the defense is going to pick those, and potentially if that goes as a bellwether, there may be a defense verdict. Yeah. The plaintiffs are going to pick, again, those really huge, the death cases, the horrible, awful, lifelong injury cases. But the judges are pretty clear. You don't want only the great cases, because not all of the cases in the inventory are great. Yeah. So you do want the variety.
And that's interesting. It kind of comes down to the judge just randomly choosing it, because I mean, I'm sure if you look at the cases, you're going to be able to tell pretty clearly which side brought it to the table. I wonder if it's something like picking a name out of a hat type random.
Well, actually, what they'll do is they'll say, you defense, you give us 4 cases that you want. Yeah. Plaintiff, you give us 4 cases, and then they'll select another 4 kind of randomly.
No, so the judge will select another 4. Wow.
Yeah. And then they'll usually go like plaintiff pick, defense pick. They'll switch back and forth.
It's like a draft.
It's a really complicated situation.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is that in this situation, in this hypothetical, there's 12 cases, but it's representing thousands, tens of thousands, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of plaintiffs and victims. And that is just so crazy to me that 12 cases, randomly being chosen out of a hat, some very specifically, some, not so specifically, are having such a massive effect on kind of everything.
They are, but it's not. So that might be, say, the first round, but there may be other rounds if they don't settle the cases. Like back in the ASR HIP days, they just tried case after case after case after case, and then there are other times where the cases are getting worked up and they don't even get to trial, and the defense is like, okay, let's get this.
All right, we get it. We'll give you what you want.
I know, that's the really good ones, but I can tell you that is not happening here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the big one, the Bard, that's the one where we have the 2 more bellwethers coming up. It is also the most common product. More people have the Bard than anything else, and then a lot of people don't know what product was used. They just know their doctor said, we're going to fix you up with a mesh. They do. That's information we can get for you. It's worth checking out. It's pretty straightforward.
You got a sticker.
Yeah, it's the product, the product sticker. But the surgeon would have that information. We can get that information. Definitely get it checked out.
Well, I think that's why it's so important for people to reach out to, because who knows what hernia mesh is going in you, unless you're a doctor or you're an attorney and you are aware of some of these issues. An everyday citizen is not going to ask those questions, and they shouldn't have to be fair. They really shouldn't have to. But reaching out to an attorney, which costs free, they'll look into it for you and see what's going on. And going back real quick, so with the 2 bellwether cases, on both of them, are there going to be cases that are randomly chosen out, or is each bellwether case one of the ones that were randomly chosen?
One of the ones that were chosen out. It was so, and because they pick them and then they start the case specific discovery.
Yeah.
So all of the cases that were filed, they filed the complaint, and then we have to file certain paperwork giving information, provide medical records. But there's not depositions of doctors or the plaintiff. Any of that doesn't happen until a case is getting chosen for trial, and then it gets worked up for trial. So once they pick out that group of cases, all of those, they start doing all of the pretrial work. Yeah. And then sometimes those cases get dismissed. They don't like it.
Yeah, what happens if, there's one of the defense cases are picked and it's just one of those really shitty ones that, some random attorney put in there? Is everyone in the leadership kind of throw their hands up and they're like, oh, shit.
Actually, no, they don't throw their hands up. What they do is they call the attorney who filed it and they're like, look, this is going to mess up for everybody. You can't win this case, blah, blah, blah. And so sometimes, very fairly often there are cases that are dismissed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are a variety of reasons there might too. Sometimes by the time you get there, say the client's died, and the case is not as good of a case anymore. It depends on the state you're in and what the law is. If they didn't die as a result of it, it's not a wrongful death claim. Like in Arizona, your pain and suffering dies with you. So now, well, yeah, I mean, I've had cases. Oh, yeah, so I've had cases like that where it's a good case, but then the client dies from something else, like a cancer or something. It has nothing to do with it, and then all you can collect are the medical bills. And then you have to pay the medical bills back to the insurance company, most of them. Yeah. And so the case is just not viable to proceed with.
Well, and the phrase, the pain and suffering dies with you. I mean, it's accurate, but it's just so awful to think about when it comes to, legal and kind of return of it idea. That's crazy to me.
Well, but if you think about it, the person who had the pain and suffering now is dead, so you can't give them money to make up for the pain and suffering. So then you would be giving their family.
Which, I mean, oftentimes the family's taking care of them while they're in that pain and suffering.
And there are states where the family can collect the pain and suffering. And so it depends on what state you're in. And, so all of these things come into play. But there are times where by the time you get ready to get this case to bellwether, it's not a good case anymore. Yeah. And so it does get voluntarily dismissed, opening up that spot for, say, another case that's.
And I can't even imagine being an attorney that's, you're just trying to get names, you're trying to get numbers up on your dockets, and all of a sudden Monday morning you get a call from all of the leadership on speakerphone chewing you out. What the hell are you doing filing this case? You got to get it out of here. You're going to ruin it for all of us.
Yeah, I think there's probably been calls like that. I'm pretty confident there are.
And you mentioned this earlier of how they ask people to not file those cases. Yeah. Don't file the bad ones, but people still do it. So why is that? With the higher numbers, you have a chance getting on leadership. It sounded like that was one of the possibilities.
There is that. And then I think that there have been times where if you filed a case, everybody they think they're going to get something, even if it's a small amount, and they're willing to do it for that. Yeah, I think it's gotten pretty tough, and that, if you don't meet certain criteria, you're not going to get paid anything. Yeah. But I think some people are like, what the heck? If we don't get money, we don't get money. We file them all. We can always dismiss it if we have to start spending a lot of money litigating it. I mean, we have always been very careful about that because, you don't want to get stuck with a case that you can't win.
It's like fishing with dynamite. I mean, you're just throwing everything out there, hoping to God something comes up.
Well, I think probably fishing with dynamite is a little bit more productive.
Yeah, that's true. I'm trying to think of a better analogy. I'm not good with analogies.
Well, so I like that one.
But you guys, you guys are more careful with it, though. You want to make sure that the cases that you do take are ones that you...
Yeah, I mean, it's not doing anybody any favors. I mean, the attorney's spending money getting in medical records. Well, although sometimes people, some of these people don't even do that till the very last minute. But, it's not good for the client. I mean, you tell them, we're going to take your case. They have certain expectations, reasonably so, and they don't think you're wasting their time and giving them false hope. And, it's not good for anybody.
Well, and that's kind of the whole setup of, personal injury attorneys not getting paid unless they win is because it's in the attorney's best interest to not waste the client's time. Right? Because I mean, you're not getting paid unless it is a good case, unless it gets and it's successful.
Yeah, you're wasting your time and your money and the client's time.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I didn't realize there was these dynamics existed and almost kind of politics behind the scenes with the leadership on both sides.
Very political.
And I can't even imagine being a judge on some of these cases. I mean, your decisions, it's one thing where you have, these large cases of, 1, 2, like even if you have 10 defendants or victims, whatever it is. But I mean, the decisions that they are making are affecting thousands and thousands of people.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a serious job.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Definitely, I mean, if you have hernia mesh, if you've had any surgeries along those lines, definitely highly recommend reaching out. If you don't know the type of hernia mesh that you have, we'll figure it out. And it's not just one brand that are having these problems. There's a lot of brands, a lot of substances and materials that are used that shouldn't be used, a lot of issues coming up, some of them taking a long time to really come up. And even if it's a small problem now, later down the line, it could be a very big problem.
Yeah, it's a really good summation. You should be an attorney.
That's what I'm here for. I summarize, ask the good questions.
Excellent.
Moving on though, we're kind of coming a little bit to a close here. I don't know if you want to get into some interesting cases in the news. If any have popped up in this last week that might be kind of extra interesting to listen to.
Well, there's lots of interesting things in the news. Always problems with the drugs and dangerous products. Mm-hmm. One that people have probably seen in the news lately is there's a class action and just a lot in the news about the fact that these decongestants are completely useless.
Oh, I've heard rumblings of this.
Yes, yeah. And it's a bunch of different brands, a bunch of products, things that I've used, and quite frankly, I always thought they cured me. But so the active ingredient, this phenylephrine. Phenylephrine. Yeah, I have a hard time pronouncing that. Anyway, there's two ingredients they usually use: this phenylephrine or the pseudoephedrine. And the pseudoephedrine is the one that they keep behind the counter because it can be used to make crack.
That's the good stuff. Yeah.
Well, but it is the good stuff in probably a variety of ways, but it is the good stuff in the fact that it is effective. But this other is absolutely not effective. And they've been selling $1.8 billion worth of it last year.
Oh, big dollars.
Big dollars. It's in all kinds of products: Benadryl, Sudafed, Mucinex, Tylenol cold and flu, NyQuil.
Sudafed. Wait, so there's one that's behind the counter that's called Sudafedronol.
Right. So there's Sudafed PE. That's the one of the ones that are over the counter.
Yeah. Have the.
Yeah, they have the ineffective.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have so the Sudafed PE, Mucinex Sinus Max, Tylenol cold and flu, NyQuil severe cold and flu, Theraflu severe cold and flu.
I see. Even the Mucinex stands out to me because they had some fantastic advertising.
The little gunky guy.
The gunky guy in your nose, and their evil guy, and you're yelling at him. He's like, no, holding onto your nose hairs, please, no. And then he flies out, and it's like, wow, I could use some of that. That sounds nice.
Yeah. But it's so weird, too, because whenever, Peter and I have gotten sick, I mean, that NyQuil severe cold and flu stuff, you can get the day one that's orange and the night one that's blue, and we'll take that, and it'll knock us out, and we always feel better.
That's for not just congestion, that's for fever and a lot of other things.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we take it for the congestion because, you can't sleep because you can't breathe.
I just mouth breathe. No big deal. Fly goes by, straight to the back of the throat.
Blah. Yeah, but I mean, it's kind of crazy that they and so the lawsuit is alleging that they've known since 2018 that this is basically completely useless, just like a sugar pill, doesn't do anything. Wow. And you've seen the ads, how they rant and rave about how great they are, and all of the commercials.
The Claritin, I can see clearly now. I don't know what it is, but it's like someone super sniffly, and then all of a sudden they can finally breathe, and then there's flowers.
I think that's an allergy medication, but similar, same kind of thing. Yeah, but it was kind of outrageous, and so there's a class action. It'll be an economic thing because it's not like there's going to be people who are injured and died and that sort of thing. So it's not going to be the PI cases, but $1.8 billion that they made in 1 year selling completely useless products to people. It's just outrageous. So there's definitely investigations going on, and we'll see what happens with it. But it sounds like they've known for a long time, and what the heck, just keep selling it.
I mean, it's crazy that people would continue to buy it too. I mean, if there's something that really was just, on the verge of a sugar pill that wasn't actually helping with these issues, you'd think, after the first few times someone uses it, they're like, what the hell's the point? I'm not going to waste money.
But you also think, well, maybe I'd be even worse if I wasn't taking it. And then you could just be like Peter and I always think oh, wow, that stuff was great.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. I mean, and again, most
Placebo.
of these. placebo effect for sure. And then, you do just generally get better from these things anyway. Was it because you took it, or would you have gotten better even not taking it?
Who knows? You better play it safe and take it.
Yeah, to the tune of $2 billion, $1.8 billion.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that this is an economic case and not a PI case, and I think this is something that it does confuse me sometimes, because I see a lot of these ads. There's one that popped up recently about Fortnite, how if you've bought V-Bucks on Fortnite, you can claim your money back. Or there was the Vizzies and the strawberries from Costco that we talked about. I think that one was a little bit more extreme though, where it's generally used products that isn't causing any of these massive injuries that a ton of people can claim that they used or that they lost money on, that can claim from this case.
Yeah, but you've got to be able to punish the companies that do this too.
Yeah.
And just because it didn't kill anybody, it still basically stole money from all of us,
Yeah.
right? And so they're asking for, I think, $5 million. To compensate people.
5 million? They made $1 billion in a single year, more than $1 billion, and then we're asking for 5 million.
I know, that does sound really low, doesn't it? Let me just look at this and make sure that I'm right on that, because it sounds ridiculously low as you say it. I'm like, wait a minute, they've got the wrong attorney. Oh no, it says the suit seeks more than $5 million in damages.
Yeah, I mean, for the amount of people that are buying and using those products, and for how long, what they knew since 2018, I think you mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, they've known for years and years. They've been selling this product, making billions of dollars, tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of Americans have been buying this every cold and flu season.
Oh yeah.
And $5 million.
And especially during COVID, man, I was like stocking up.
Fuck, you divide that out among everyone, and that's like maybe a tenth of a single box of one.
Yeah, that's nuts. Well, yeah, they should be asking for more, but that $5 million apparently is what they're asking for. And this was falling because the NFDA report came out this past week, which basically said it was ineffective.
So are they going to continue to sell this? Because, I mean, there's so many brands, just the ones that you mentioned, but you go into a cold and flu section at Walgreens, CVS, and most of it mentions congestion. It's in big, bold letters. I mean, are these products going to change their advertising? Are they going to be taken off shelves? Are they just going to continue doing that?
Well, there's a whole investigation is ongoing right now, but I suspect that they're not going to be selling them anymore, and they're not going to be allowed to sell the ones that have this product or this phenylephrine in it. Phenylephrine. Yeah. And so, I mean, I can tell you for sure, and I have at times gone to the actual pharmacy window to get the other kind of Sudafed, but it's like a pain in the butt. You've got to give your ID and the whole hoopla to make sure that you're not buying too much, so you're not like making crack in your garage.
Well, it's from I'm familiar with it from Breaking Bad. That was the whole thing. They would have to go and get boxes and boxes of it. I don't even know how it really works. There's just a chemical in it, and then you crush it up, and somehow you can turn that into meth.
Pseudoephedrine.
Yeah, Sudafed.
Pseudoephedrine. Yeah. So but I'm going to go get that crack medicine next time. Next time I'm congested, that's where I'm going.
If you're going to spend money, you might as well spend it on something that is going to
actually might work.
Yeah, and then if it doesn't, then hopefully you'll get more than a few bucks with this 5 million shit.
Yeah. But so the difference again is the class actions. There will be a big pot of money, and people can make claims to get compensated if they've bought those products over the years. But it's not. You don't have to file an actual lawsuit. You would just make a claim.
And usually the claim is just like sending in a receipt or something along those lines. And then, but I mean, again, at 5 million, and a lot of these aren't going to make people even.
Well, no. And I mean, who has receipts either? I don't know how many of those I've bought over the years. I just know that I've bought them.
Yeah.
There's a few in our medicine cabinets now, but.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, just some more bad actions.
That's interesting. I mean, we'll probably be talking about those type of cases more often. I do kind of want maybe one of these future shows to go over some of the big ones that I see advertising all the time, and I think oftentimes they're advertising to young adults. I mean, there's a lot of like I mentioned, Fortnite. There's a big lawsuit going on with them and with the V-Bucks and returning that. There's a big thing going on with Steam, which Steam is like essentially a gaming marketplace where if you play a PC game, it's probably off of Steam. And so there's a massive similar suit where, you're not actually suing someone, but there's a pot of money that you can claim.
Right.
And so I think it would be interesting if we did a little bit of a deeper dive into those type of cases down the line.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, very, very interesting. We are kind of coming to a close, like I said here. Do we want to kind of touch on some of the questions and comments that we've had?
Sure. Yeah, let's do that. We can always talk about more news next week. So we had a lot of comments and questions about the McDonald's, the hot fry case that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. And before that, we had talked about the hot nugget case. And, people having very strong opinions, which is good. Yeah. Absolutely. Feel free, have strong opinions. It's excellent for our algorithm. But one of the questions that came out of that, so a lot of people feel like it's a stupid lawsuit and it's, ridiculous that a parent would sue because their child was injured, and just person after person was saying, hey, what about the parent? Shouldn't the parent be testing the food and making sure that it's hot, that it's not too hot and it's not going to injure their child? And I agree with that. I think there's both things going on there. I mean, the food shouldn't be ridiculously hot that it's going to injure somebody if you accidentally drop it, because people do accidentally drop things. Yeah. But also test the food before you give it to your child. Yeah. So one of the questions that came up out of that is people thought that it was a stupid lawsuit, and they were saying, what's the story? Can you just sue for anything and everything? And the answer to that is, well, you could, but you'd be really stupid to do that, because there are sanctions. That would be called a frivolous lawsuit. Mm-hmm. And if you file a lawsuit where you don't have a good basis for it, it's going to be a big waste of your time and your money, and can be very expensive. You're going to pay the filing fee to start with, and then you can get sanctions, and you can have to pay the other side's attorney's fees.
And sanctions, can you explain that?
So sanctions is like a punishment by the court, like a monetary punishment, where the court says, you know what, you filed this case and you had no good faith basis to file it. You wasted my time as the judge. You've wasted the other side's time. They've had to pay attorney's fees. Yeah. So you're going to have to pay them back for the time and the money that they spent defending this case.
It's like fines, essentially.
Yeah. It's definitely like fines. And so the point of the matter is that you're going to have, if you want to bring a stupid lawsuit, I mean, you can go file it on your own. Good luck with that. Not a good idea. Don't recommend it. Yeah. But if you go to a lawyer, you're going to have a hard time getting a lawyer to do that, because the lawyer then knows that they are potentially going to be wasting their time, wasting their money, and the lawyers get sanctioned too.
Yeah, I was going to say, are there bar sanctions?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's generally monetary sanctions, but if you continue to do that, there could be an ethical issue as well, which then could bring in the bar, could affect your license. So, no, I mean, the straight up answer is sure, people can, and there are a lot of people. I mean, I've known some people who were particularly litigious, and they would just file things right and left, pro se, which means filing it without a lawyer. And man, those are some crazy cases.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine if they're willing to kind of go off the rails and not even, reach out to an attorney. And if there's a case that attorneys aren't taking, but they're like, screw it, I'm just going to go at it solo, I can imagine how crazy they could be.
Well, and a lot of those times it's because maybe they have talked to an attorney, and an attorney said, no, this isn't a valid case. It's not a viable case. I'm not going to file it for you. And they can't find somebody, so they just decide they're going to file it on their own, and they don't understand the law. And I mean, they're given a lot more leeway than an attorney who does know the law and has filed a case anyway. So, these cases, I understand that some people think that they're stupid, but for example, the hot nugget case, that was a viable case. If the defense thinks it's not a viable case at the beginning, they can file a motion to dismiss sometimes, or a motion for summary judgment. Sometimes cases get dismissed before they get to trial. That one did not. It went to trial, and then ultimately they awarded $800,000. So a jury who heard all of the information from both sides found that was served too hot, and it was a dangerous situation. So I guess the answer is that's not a frivolous case.
Yeah. And I think it all started with the hot coffee with McDonald's, right? Which is kind of just such a hot topic, topic, right? I mean, everyone really wants to talk about it. Everyone thinks it's outrageous on both sides. When you really start hearing about the details, we covered it in one of our episodes, going into detail of just how hot that coffee was, how unreasonable it was for it to be served that way. It was a massive settlement, right? I mean, I don't know if you know the amount off the top of your head. But.
Well, it was really massive, and then it got knocked down lower. It was still a lot. But, you have to think, too, Yes, we all know that food is hot, but when the whole thing with the drive-throughs, I mean, when you're handing people food when they're driving through the drive-through, they're leaving. I mean, people do drop things, people do spill things.
Yeah.
And so if it's so ridiculously hot that you're going to have third-degree burns and you're going to have skin grafting, that's not what you expected when you went through this drive-through and bought this product. But yes, be careful. Yes, take precautions. But we all know that can happen.
Yeah, and playing devil's advocate here, because I did see a lot of the comments going down and a lot of blame going on the parents. And, like you said, there's definitely two sides to everything. Is there any concerns or any repercussions for the parents? I mean, I understand this food is being served hot, but I would also, if I was the defense, say, maybe they aren't taking care of their kid. They aren't keeping their eye on it, right? Is there anything along those lines of them lacking the responsibility and ability to actually care for this child and putting him at risk?
Well, sure. I mean, and I think that's, the arguments that would be made at court too is that, so maybe McDonald's has some percentage of responsibility, but how much percentage of responsibility is on the parent?
Yeah.
And what did the parent do to ensure that before they handed that food to their child that it was, at a reasonable temperature? So yeah, but I mean, it would be comparative faults and I saw some people like going on and saying that CPS should be called and that sort of thing. I mean, if CPS gets called when you take your kid through the McDonald's drive-through, we got some issues.
Well, I mean, I think if you take your kid through the McDonald's drive-through and they come back with third-degree burns, then it's a little different. But I do think it's a really interesting case, and we love bringing it up because we know that it's interesting. It's interesting because of the history that McDonald's has with cases. It's interesting because everyone really wants to hear about it. And these are kind of the cases that people think are absurd or crazy, the coffee case, and then end up, when you really look at it, being valid. And when you start going through the nitty gritty, when you start, seeing both sides to it. But oftentimes people don't do that type of research and they just kind of see that headline and jump.
And they react
instantly.
Yes, lots of reaction.
Lots of reactions. But no, we appreciate all the comments and the outrage and the sympathy on both sides that people are feeling. We definitely want to hear it. And if anyone has any questions, I mean, the question about frivolous lawsuits, I think, is really interesting. And I think that's a big concern that a lot of people have. Yeah. It gives, attorneys kind of a bad rap if they think that, you can just throw a lawsuit for anything and get a few bucks, which it just isn't the case. And if anything, it's not only going to cost you fees, but you'll be sanctioned and it's cost you even more. Yeah. But if anyone does have any questions, feel free to throw them down in the comments and send us an email too, podcast@showardlaw.com. I think we are coming to a close. Is there anything else you want to touch on before we send it off?
I don't think so. I think we're good for tonight.
Awesome. Well, I do want to thank everyone for tuning in and hanging out with us another week, another show. We'll be back next week, same time, with a fantastic episode. We got something lined up. And we'll be throwing out some content on Facebook, on TikTok, and Instagram. Definitely take a look over there. Our Facebook, it's been going kind of crazy. We've been getting a good amount of views, a good amount of comments. We appreciate all the feedback and interaction. Like I said, throw in the questions, and they don't even have to be questions. Sometimes they can just be stories, things that you experience. And if you want us to talk about it, if you want us to go in some depth or anything like that, let us know, and we can do our research and have a good conversation about it. But with that being said, I hope everyone has a fantastic week, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Prioritizing profits.
Dangerous drug and product cases.